21st with Michael S. Lisoswski, longtime BWMT member from the early 80s through the mid-90s. Michael has been a member of BWMT Milwaukee and was a national board member of the BWMT, and we'll let Michael talk a little bit about himself. And so with that, Michael, do you want to just give us a little background about yourself before we get into the actual questions for the history project of the NABWMT?
Okay, what do you need to know?
Well, maybe a little demographics about yourself. You could start with it.
Well, I've lived in Milwaukee all my life. I'm just turned 50, so new millennium, new age. And I've been pretty much a gay activist since I came out, basically, when I was about 26. So I've been involved in a lot of things, especially working with young people and youth. And I've kind of seen our community, and I suppose the NABWMT, go through changes over time. It's been a quarter of a century I've been involved in a lot of activist work, or almost a quarter of a century, 24 years. So I guess you could say I'm a veteran of sorts.
Okay. You're single? Are you in a relationship?
I'm single. I have been for numbers of years. I know probably will continue with the rest of my existence as being single. So, but you never know what people have in store for us. So.
For the viewing audience, my name is D.A. Leonard. I'm part of the history project of the National Association of Black and White Men Together. And again, this is Michael Lisoswski. And we're going to start. We have actually 15 questions. And Michael, for your own edification, you have a copy of that. One of the things is, if there's something you want to expand on, perfectly willing. If there's something you don't feel comfortable with answering, you can just tell us that also. The questions are derived to try to record the history of the National Association of Black and White Men Together and your involvement also on the local level. So the first question is, when did you join the NABWMT, or the National Association of Black and White Men Together?
Well, I know I joined the Milwaukee chapter, I think it was 1980 or 81, or the fall of 1980, because I know the one in San Francisco started that year. I think we either were later on that year, and I remember going to an organizational meeting for that. When I joined the National, I don't know, I have a feeling that whenever the National started, I guess Milwaukee was part of that. So. But I think the first time I kind of heard of national conventions was, I think, like 1982 or 1983. So joining the National per se, I think, came along as having joined the Milwaukee chapter back in 1980, 81.
Why did you join?
Well, I was involved interracially, I think, with different people over the years at that time, and believe that this organization would be a way for social support, also for a way to be an advocate for interracial issues, and also to hopefully promote change not only within the gay community but also within Milwaukee and probably within the country.
Did you belong to any other chapters besides the Milwaukee chapter?
I think I just was a member of Milwaukee chapter. I know over the years there were times you could belong to other sister city chapters, and I'm not sure if I ever had any dual memberships. I think you might have done that. I remember that's why it just kind of rang a bell with me, but I think I was just a Milwaukee member.
You are correct. I had belonged to a number of different chapters. What was your first BWMT, MACT, PACT meeting like? And I'll let you answer, then I'll follow.
Okay. Actually, the first meeting, I think it was an organizational meeting, but then I remember we used to meet at a home, I think it was on 14th and Vine, and those are kind of social. People brought, it was like a potluck, people brought potlucks to these, or brought things to share. And the meetings are very brief, maybe a half an hour, and there were anywhere from 20, 25, maybe to 30 people, and then after the meeting was over, people just kind of paired up. So the meetings were sort of very briefly a meeting, and afterwards, since we were in friend's home, We just kind of split up and went for little nooks and crannies all over the place, and ate, and then kind of paired off if we were lucky at the time, and I guess did our thing. So the meetings then were very more socially oriented, and actually were started out as potluck socials.
When you say paired up, are you meaning for performing intimate acts with another gentleman?
Well, paired up to talk or just make out or kiss or whatever they were going to do. As you would say, perform maybe some intimate act or two.
When was your first meeting with the national organization?
I think my first national one was, let's see, 87. Wait, 86 was New York. So what was the one in 85? Atlanta?
85 would have been L.A. 84 was Atlanta.
Okay, then my first one was New York in 86. So that was my first meeting.
Do you remember any specific people, either at your local, first couple meetings, your local, or the national, or actually both?
I can't remember who I met nationally. I mean, on the national level at the meeting. I remember Dr. John Bush. I mean, he's always someone you can't forget. I met him I remember at the first national meeting, and I think probably Ollie, as he had been involved early enough from the beginning.
Some of our viewers will not know Ollie. Do you know who? Could you describe?
Ollie Taylor?
Ollie Lee Taylor?
Ollie Lee Taylor, okay. So nationally, I think those are the only two. I'm just trying to recollect faces. I remember over the years, I remember that other people that I would have met the year later and the next year at other conventions had been at earlier conventions, but
like Erwin Rothenberg.
Yeah, I was thinking Erwin, but I think I kind of got to know him probably a little better when we had our Milwaukee national meeting in '87. Locally, the people that went, I know it was you, myself, Alan.
Again, I'm going to ask you to use full names.
Oh, Alan Hess, I think, who died in '89. He was at the New York convention. I think Frank Federico was there. Yourself, D.A. Leonard. I don't know if Echo Michael Ross was there or not.
He didn't come until '87, I think.
I think Quentin Jameson might have been there. Maybe, let's see, who else was there? Lived on Wisconsin Avenue there. I can't remember. Used to work for the county. Died when
Ken and Peters.
Ken and Peters, I'm not sure if he was there, but
Richard Miner?
Richard Miner. I remember we probably had a good, maybe dozen people that went, if that many. It's funny because you think you'd remember a lot of these people, but it's just kind of, sometimes you can remember some people, some not.
You sort of hit on it in the last one. Where was your first convention? I think you said it was New York. And was there was it a large convention? Was there a large contingent from your home chapter?
Well, I think we had maybe a dozen people that went. I can't even recall. It could have been more, it could have been less. But I remember being in New York City was kind of an incentive, and I think a lot of us. I think I went to that one. One of the reasons because we were planning our national in Milwaukee the following year, and we wanted to see. Well, let's see how they do this convention. Not that there's a comparison between New York and Milwaukee, but I think we thought if we could get a feel for the convention and come back with all the different ideas. Actually, another person that I met that I was very close friends with even before that was Redvers Jean-Marie, who died, I believe, in '88.
He was from the East Coast, correct?
Yeah, he's from New York City. I remember having traveled to New York for a convention and met him through the Black NABWMT, and actually stayed with him, when I was visiting there at one point. So I do remember Redvers for that reason. And so that was one of the reasons we went, also because it was New York City. I mean, it's a good enough reason to go to New York City for any reason. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. I think we didn't stay in the air-conditioned dorms. The one thing I remember, I think later on in the week, it got kind of humid there in New York, and we were in these dormitories, and I think you and myself, Frank Federico, and one other person we shared.
Michael Ross.
Michael, okay, I thought you said Echo wasn't there. And Michael, we shared what I guess they were like sort of dormitory rooms, and there wasn't air conditioning, but we were close. It was right. I think we were like right across the street from where the convention was, or if we would have been at the Columbia dorms, I think those were air conditioned, but they were also a little jaunt up the road. And I remember that New York convention was very political because I know they wanted to do a protest and not attend the fireworks. We did have a boat cruise, which was great, but on the night of the fireworks, I think they had other activities to protest that July 4th was not really an Independence Day for many people, but an enslavement or a continuation of enslavement for the Native American population and for African Americans. So we did miss out on the fireworks, even though I think we were able to hear them as we were attending some other kind of political rallies or something within the convention.
Did you get anything specifically from attending that convention? I'm skipping a couple questions that you already answered in the previous.
I just enjoyed this, the city, because I think that had been the second time I had been there in, since like '68. I think that was the first time I had probably been there. But I enjoyed the city. I kind of enjoyed the political, just the whole political rambunctiousness of the whole city, and also the convention itself is very, very politically motivated. I mean, it was well attended by the very well attended. I think we had over close to 200 people, and I just remembered it was just a well put together convention. I'm always one that kind of likes to get as much as I can out of something. I mean, social activities are nice, but I also thought it was a very good mix of social activities and also the political fervor that was going on at the time in New York City.
How many conventions in total did you attend? Do you recall?
Well, I did New York, and then the next year we had our Milwaukee convention. The year after that, that would have been '88. I think I missed. That was Boston. And then '89 was Tallahassee. I missed that one, but I did go to San Francisco in '90. And I think after that, what was '91? That was Detroit. Went to Detroit. '92 was Dallas. '93 was Chicago. '94 was DC. So those are the ones those are all the national ones that I attended.
Now, at one of the national conventions, and I'm not sure which one, you were elected to the national board and you had an office, and I know you were one of the secretaries, but I can't remember which secretary.
That was '90. I was corresponding secretary, and that was 1990 because I remember going to New York again that fall. So it must have been San Francisco when I was elected. And I remember going to New York in '90 because I remember serving 2 terms, '90 to '92 and '92 to '94. So I again our first board meeting was in New York, and this was at a time, interestingly, where I think the national and the New York chapter were kind of at each other's, not at each other's throats, but at odds with each other, and we were wondering how we were going to be treated there when we went for our board meeting. In fact, we purposely went to New York, I think, to kind of try to make amends and just to kind of smooth things out, and it was a good weekend again. I remember staying with Don Ransom over in Jersey, and again by that time Redvers had passed, so I didn't. He had already died, but I remember seeing some good old friends again. So.
Okay, we're recording again. Sorry for the pause. Did you notice any difference between early conventions? You said '86, '87, and then the latter conventions that you attended.
Well, the New York one I always thought was the most politicized, and I think San Francisco also had that was the next one I had gone to other than Milwaukee, a very politicized convention. I know we did a good job in Milwaukee because people knew that we could not even compete or try to compare ourselves to New York, but I remember we did a boat trip the first night, and that was very much successful. I remember going on the big old cruiser in New York and then having our little dinky one in Milwaukee, but people enjoyed it, and it was fun. It brought people together. But I remember New York and I think San Francisco for the very political conventions. I remember Alan Hess getting, I think his name was Thomas Cochran or James Cochran, I can't remember, but he was an author who had done a book, Black and White Styles in Conflict, and we had him for like a whole day doing a series of workshops which were taped. And I remember that was kind of an interesting thing to have one speaker come in for a whole day for a workshop or for a convention. Usually, when they just speak for one main lecture or one event. Also, I think the other conventions that probably, let's see if I'm comparing politics and social. I think, let's see, where did we go? New York. I think as they kind of got on a little bit later on. they tended to have the political bent to them, but I think they tended to be more social in nature. I mean, there were workshops, etc., and the speakers were good, but I just somehow remember New York being really kind of a firebrand type of conference, and also San Francisco, because we attended the Nelson Mandela rally during that time. And also San Francisco is the birthplace of Black and White Men Together and the NA. And New York being on the East Coast, so those two cities are going to be the most politically charged, probably of the cities that we have within the national. So the conventions later on, I think, from what I recall, they're very social and supportive in nature, but probably not as politically charged. Again, that's my impression. I could be wrong on that.
One of the impressions that, and I've done a number of these interviews with both Dr. John Bush and Tim Wilson first, and then Michael Warner and Tim West, they've all have been NABWMT co-chairs. And the issue is that the being recounted by all the people, foremost about the Milwaukee Convention, was the name change debate. Do you recall anything on that? Were you part of that, or you didn't see that?
Actually, now that you bring that up, I do remember that was our big, that was where everything kind of came to a head. And I'm trying to think what we were going to call. I guess it was supposed to be still NABWMT. It was going to become
NAMACT. It was going to be NAMACT.
And it did stick with the BWMT. And I'm not sure at the time. I think I kind of favored the Black and White Men Together at that time. I think later on, I think I might have changed my opinion. But I believed at that time that the name BWMT kind of showed the kind of the disparity and the divisiveness within the country between blacks and whites, and so we thought by keeping it as black and white, it kind of maintained that focus, whereas MACT, or some of the other ones, PACT, kind of tended to dilute that. And I, from my recollection, I think I wanted to stick with the Black and White Men Together at that time, but I think later on, I think I kind of shifted over more to the MACT or the PACT.
And the other controversial piece.
Well, actually, if I can, and with the name change, they thought that would kind of tear the convention apart. But I remember that Milwaukee was complimented. They said if it probably wouldn't have been in Milwaukee, that might have brought a real big rift within the organization, because the way Milwaukee hosts handled it, and the events that we had, and the fun times, and the sociability, and the congeniality, and Milwaukee Gemütlichkeit, that kind of kept the convention together and kept it from breaking and falling apart, splintering apart over that debate. So I remember that was kind of a fiery debate.
It was a very divisive debate. The other issue that the four co-chairs that I've interviewed mentioned about Milwaukee, their recollection, was our banquet speaker, Mr. Joseph Beam. And do you recall anything about that?
Well, two things I recall, and one was that I was taking pictures of him afterwards. I remember he had the white shirt, the white shorts. He was kind of looked like a sailor. And the reason I recall taking those pictures is that I had a picture. I was in a picture that someone took with me and him, and for some reason the film and the camera wasn't in right or something, and it didn't turn out, so I never got any of those pictures. And secondly, I got to spend some time with him just talking, because it was basically my idea to book him. I remember seeing his book coming out the year earlier, and I said we should get Joe Beam for our convention. So I believe that was my idea to nab him. And we were talking and everything, and I kind of got. I felt close. I said, it would have been nice if there would have been some kind of a spark there. I said I would have, that he was kind of my type of person. And but the next thing is that he died. I believe either that December or the following December, like the day or two after Christmas, or was found. And I found that very kind of tragic that here we had someone who was like early 30s, had just had at our convention, and then within a year. Was dead. I'm not even sure if it was that same year. I think it was 88 that he died. Their convention was in 87. But how tragic and everything. And then at the same time is that how lucky we were all to have him with us and share that time with us. Another year later, I think we would have probably missed out on that.
When you attended your later conventions, Detroit, San Francisco, Detroit, Dallas, and Washington, D.C., you were already a national officer. Was convention different from that vantage point than as, say, just an attendee from a national chapter or hosting a convention?
Well, you kind of knew when you went to the board meetings, you were always kind of getting updates and plans and things on how the convention was going. So you were sort of in the background of getting the convention together, even though you weren't responsible. You were just kind of checking up with the host city. So it wasn't something where you just got things in the mail, talked about it at your chapter meetings, and then decided to, and then went to it. So you're kind of in on the administrative end of it, even though it wasn't that much, but also some of the other things, like some of the issues that were going to be maybe discussed, some of the politics between chapters, between cities. Instead of just kind of going to a convention and kind of enjoying and meeting people, you're always kind of in the background with some of the politics of the organization. Something just came to mind that I was going to mention too about the conventions, and it slipped my mind, but it'll probably come back again when you mentioned the other cities. So.
Have there been any specific projects within the local BWMT or the National Association of Black and White Men Together that you've been involved with over time?
Well, I remember when I was involved, I think, back in 84, 5, and 6, maybe even 87. And I think you joined DA, I think in 84, 85.
83, 84.
And one of my things was I was kind of involved politically a lot and had, kind of getting involved in a lot of community things. And I always tried to kind of bridge that gap between the gay community and the straight community. So I remember having speakers coming in. I remember you probably were there, I think, when our state senator, Gary George, who's a black state senator, I had him come in and speak. I just asked him because I think knew him and chatted with him a few times, had gone to some campaign things. Polly Williams, who did the school choice program, was my black state legislator. I believe I had her come in. We had James Cameron, who was the last person almost to be lynched in this country. Well, maybe not the last person, but back in the 20s, and survived the lynching and started up the Black Holocaust Museum. We had him come in. So I wanted to kind of say that even though our black and white gay experience might seem unique to us, we have to look at other people's vantage points from their perspective. But also by having them come in and speak to us, they got to learn our perspectives and what we were about. So it was sort of a kind of a bridging of different cultures and different communities, and trying to show that we're all involved in the same struggle, racism issues, homophobia, and basically a lot of it boils down to the same thing, distrust of people because they're different. So I always thought that by doing that we were able to blend things together and make them make kind of bridge those communities together. I also remember, I think in 87 we did a regional, and that I know was very successful. I think it was 87 or 86, I don't know what year, but I remember we housed people at the Wisconsin Hotel. And you remember that one?
Actually, we had 3 or 4 regionals while I was involved.
Okay, I was just thinking of the one we had at the Wisconsin Hotel.
That would have been probably 88 or 89,
okay,
after the convention.
Okay, and yeah, probably. But I remember being involved in that and making that working off kind of successfully.
Well, I want to commend you because, as you said, you brought in different speakers and different vantage points. Mm-hmm. And I can remember you facilitated bringing in Judge Stanley Miller to speak to our group.
Oh, that was for our regional, yeah.
Yeah. Marcia Cobbs Jones was a state legislature. And then I think you were instrumental, and I think it was at convention that they had Leon Rouse come to speak to the group, and I thought you were the liaison, you yourself or Mark Behar, that got him there, because Leon was the one that was the impetus in getting Wisconsin to have the gay rights law, the first in the nation. And basically we were letting people know, here's an expert on how to get good legislation for the gay, lesbian people and how to get that nationwide. I think now there's 8 or 9 states, but Wisconsin was the first under the leadership. And I think you and Mark Behar and maybe Alan Hess were very much instrumental in bringing people like that in.
And I think that you mentioned some of those people, especially Alan Hess. I mean, it's really sad to say that a lot of good people that were involved in that organization are no longer with us because of AIDS. I don't know if we could say we lost 25, a third, maybe 40% of our membership in those early years. And just as HIV and AIDS was getting its impact into the country, I remember talking to someone and they said, sad to say, BWMT may have been an avenue or a venue, ironically, where people coming from all over the country may have gotten together and had sexual relationships or encounters over the courses of the conventions, and maybe have gotten infected or infected other people in the convention. And again, no one's to blame for that or putting blame on that. It's just that was something that happened because, basically probably starting in Cleveland in 82 and then 83, I think was D.C.
Columbus was
or Columbus.
It was Washington, D.C. First of all, it was San Francisco, then
Mhm.
Washington, D.C., and then Columbus.
Columbus.
And then the one that I first went to was Atlanta in '84.
Okay, I don't know what 83 was. We skipped one there, but
No, that was Columbus.
okay. And then so when someone brought that to my attention, I said, it's sad to say that could be true,
Mhm.
but but you're looking back, and you're Monday night quarterbacking. But I remember Alan Hess may have, died in '89. I mean, he's been dead 11 years already, and a very, very politically minded person, was very responsible for the Milwaukee gay community getting up on its feet, especially black and white men together, and other tremendous people, John Teemer, Reggie Williams, Redver Jean Marie. I mean, he was sort of the conscience of NABWMT. In New York, I remember people referred to him as the conscience of the organization many times. So just looking back and thinking of all those conventions, the people that are no longer with us.
Just for our viewers, I just want to state that not every member we lost did we lose to AIDS. We
Oh,
lost
yeah.
people like Del Pascavas, who was murdered. Dale, and I can't remember his last name, from Detroit, was murdered.
Mhm.
Some people just died of natural causes. Ron Cook in Wisconsin died of a heart attack. But we've lost many, many members, and I do realize that. But it's not all AIDS.
But it's just the sense of the loss of it I kind of think of when I'm looking back. So
While you were a national officer, the secretary, and again, I beg your indulgence, I can't remember whether it was recording or corresponding.
yeah, there was corresponding, and then there was secretary.
What was your responsibility? What did you really do with
Was corresponding secretary kept track of the minutes and the the meetings and everything, and the corresponding secretary they've had a lot more correspondence and keeping in touch with other chapters out, and also information and things outside the organization, correspondence, and they believed that it was kind of really a lot of work for the secretary to do, so they established that post. And basically, it was just kind of networking and establishing communications and corresponding with primarily organizations from outside the National Association of Black and White Men Together, and keeping up with some of the things that involved our organization. So basically, and then also kind of doing some of the ancillary work that were non-minutes. Had to do with non-minutes. So there's also keeping in touch with chapters, sending things out regarding national information. One of the things I remember trying to do was to get a calendar together of all the different chapter anniversaries and events that were going on, and trying to correspond with the different chapters, so that when we did our national newsletter, that we were able to keep a record. So every year we would know exactly when these things were going to happen, because a lot of times people would come on board, and if we didn't have a yearly calendar, it's kind of difficult to remember when all these anniversaries and everything were. And so I thought, well, maybe it'd be kind of nice if we could just kind of, and believe me, just trying to correspond with like some 30, I think it was some 33 chapters at that time. Just trying to keep all that information together, because most chapters kept their anniversaries and celebrations around the same time, but once in a while someone would change because of some other function that came up, and so trying to keep up with all that could pose to be kind of difficult at times. So,
what was the most memorable? Memorable. That's a good one. I can't say it. Moment for you in the organization.
Actually, I think just meeting all the great people from around the country that I met. One of the most memorable moments I remember was in Detroit. Well, actually in New York, and they both involved two individuals.